have a heart of steel. You look around, what's to come? You're gonna fight here to the end. You push too hard, now I make it real. Come on! We're gonna run you down, and we're gonna throw you out, and we're gonna run this town tonight, and we're gonna lay it down, better not come around, and we're gonna run this town tonight, tonight, tonight. We're gonna run this town tonight.
just crazy to think like the G-forces too. Like you can feel like your body being pulled to the right. I mean, it's my car.
Maybe he wants to, race the Pit Boy racing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's what I'm trying to do. Let's navigate you over to our waters, all right?
See that?
That's what we need. No draft you.
Would you please welcome the 2019 eNASCAR Peak Antifreeze iRacing Series champion from Roush Fitway Racing, Zach Novak.
Here to be recognized as the 2019 eNASCAR Peak Antifreeze iRacing Series is first-time series champion Zach Novak. Presenting Zach with the eNASCAR Peak Antifreeze Series Championship ring, trophy, and a check for $43,750 is NASCAR Series Director Jusan Hamilton.
Let's meet this person.
Energy!
The road to $300,000 kicks off tonight with the start of a new decade and a new era, where from the virtual Daytona International Speedway, we say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to the 2020 season opener of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. We're ready to rock and roll for an 11th season of this NASCAR-sanctioned Esports World Championship, and we're so very excited to be along for the ride right alongside all of you tuning in at home. We'll introduce you to the rest of the booth team in just a moment. However, alongside myself, Evan Pasoko, I'm happy to be joined by Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Officer at NASCAR, Tim Clark, on the iRacing Esports Network. Tim, thanks for the time.
Hey guys, glad to be here.
So obviously we're so excited to get this 2020 campaign underway. How does NASCAR view this iRacing relationship, and more particularly this Coca-Cola iRacing Series, now that we enter that 11th campaign?
Yeah, honestly, we couldn't be happier. I think we built a ton of momentum last year. The partnership with iRacing has been incredible in every sense of the word. They're the best partners you could have. they've got this platform that they built upon for a lot of years, and we're a big part of that, I think. And having Coke come on board this year is really just the icing on the cake. We had a great partnership with Peak for a number of years, and now to have Coke come on board and to see some of the new teams that have jumped on board this year, honestly, we just couldn't be more thrilled with how everything is coming together.
When we look at the big picture, how does this series fall in line with all of NASCAR's initiatives, and ultimately, what is the goal in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal, quite frankly, is just to reach a new audience. So I think we know how unique this platform is in sports and certainly within esports. To have this be not only an esports platform, but also a step in the ladder of a driver, in their quest to get into legitimate racing. That's so unique for us, and if we can reach a younger audience, a different audience, increase the fandom, and I've said before, I mean, this is just a different time of where people are getting introduced to the sport, and this is such a critical piece of it, and again, just thrilled to have this partnership with iRacing that helps us reach a different audience.
Well, with the growth that this series sees year over year, we truly appreciate all of the work that everybody at NASCAR and iRacing does. And as it continues to grow, the workload only gets higher and higher. So we greatly appreciate everything you do behind the scenes. We appreciate you as well. Giving us some time here pre-race. We're about to get going, so we'll let you jet out of here, Tim, but hope to catch up with you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Evan.
Big thanks to Tim Clark for our pre-race guest this evening. Again, the Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Officer at NASCAR. We'll now bring the rest of our broadcast team into the fold. Tim Terry and Randy Cheneth along with me tonight, as they will be for the entirety of this 2020 campaign. And Tim, like we have for all 10 years prior, the season starts on the high banks of Daytona.
Indeed it does. Glad to be along for the ride with you, Evan and Randy, as we get ready to go. 20 races, but it starts off at Daytona. You certainly can't lose a championship here, but you can certainly either get yourself behind the 8 ball or get yourself ahead of the game. Excited to see who comes out on top tonight.
Well, it's funny as well, Randy, because we've been racing here for the better part of the last 2 weeks between the Clash and the Shootout, but we haven't handed out any points yet. And while a lot of drivers will argue that Daytona is just step one and the real points battle begins next week, the arena is set for the first of our 20 battles this season.
Yeah, and it's the most iconic circuit of them all that these guys are going to come to, and it's going to be ideal conditions for these guys. You're seeing them right now on screen. 69 degrees, the ambient temperature. Track temp only 80 degrees, Evan, and mild winds here. These guys have prime conditions for these race cars tonight. They're going to be handling more than okay. These cars are going to be hooked up.
Field is set for the first of 20 races this campaign. As we inch closer to going green, let's take a look at our eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series starting grid for tonight's Daytona 250, and it is Bobby Zielinski on pole, a 47.211, just edging out Mullis. That difference between those two is down to a 4th decimal point, so he barely squeaks out the top spot. You can see those Richmond Raceway Esports cars, though, 2-3, with Novak leading up the inside of the second row, along with Chris Shearburn, Ashton Crowder, and Corey Vincent. A pair of 2 drivers, Tim, who are sticking with their teams from last year. They make up row 3.
And row number 4, you're going to see Keegan Leahy on the inside. He's going to be strong in a few of the practice races this week. How about 2-time winner Ray Alfala in row number 5 on the outside of Matt Busa, Christian Chalner on the outside of row number 4, and then 2 veterans of this series, Brad Davies on the inside for JRM, and the William Byron Esports, number 25, and Nick Ottinger.
And as we move on back, you have a lot of big names back here as well. Brian Schoenberg and Jake Nichols on row number 7. Chris Overland and Alex McCullum on row 8, with Blake Reynolds and Michael Guest back here as well. Those 3 rows, a nice mix of veterans and newcomers as well to this series.
Yeah, next list, 6 cars and 6 different teams. Logan DeClampett in the 99 machine will be on the inside of row 10, which puts Ryan Luza halfway home in 20th position. You can see former series champion Michael Conti and a former race winner here at Daytona, and Jeremy Allen making his return to the series with JTG. He's on the outside of that row. Jarl Teed with G2, along with Justin Bolton and one of the new teams, Stuart Haas Esports.
Our Clash winner going to roll off on the inside of row number 13, John Gorlinski, Eric Smith, Nathan Lyon, Santiago Tires, one of the rookies to the series outside row 14, Brandon Cattell, and Michael Guerrilla on the outside of row 15. The 15 starts on the outside of row 15.
And as we get deeper, still big names back here. Garrett Lowe and Dylan Duvall on row 16. Malik Ray and Phil Diaz, they were going to round out that 17th row. And Graham Bolin, as well as the driver that won the most popular vote, the fan vote last year, Casey Kerwin, he'll be starting deep in tonight's season opener.
I know it's not ideal, but everybody on the grid, no matter where you start's got an opportunity. And as we look through the field at rows 19 and 20, Bob Bryant and Kane Cook going to be the drivers that start 39th and 40th position this evening. It certainly makes things easier if you start up front, but this is a marathon. Unlike the sprints and even the shootout earlier this week, Tim, that wasn't that much longer in distance compared to the Clash the week prior. We have not seen a full-length race yet with all 40 drivers in their new colors and with their new teams, so it's going to be a very different story. I think nerves as well going to play a part.
And this is the first time, as you mentioned, we're going to see 2 rounds of pit stops. Whether it be under green or caution, these drivers will have to come down twice to put fuel in their race cars. 100 laps, pit road speed, 55 miles an hour. And Zach Novak, last season's champion, kicked off the season with a win at Daytona. We've had a couple of champions win this race before. We'll see if we can get a 4th different champion win here at Daytona when we roll off here.
This will be the all-time 12th start at Daytona International Speedway. This season also going to be the only second time since the inaugural campaign back in 2010 where this racetrack appears twice on the calendar. We'll see it later this year on August the 25th for round number 13. In those 11 races thus far, we have seen 10 different race winners, Randy. Only Ray Alfala has done it multiple times in 2011 and 2015.
Yeah, it's a star-studded cast, isn't it, that lines up the winners list here at Daytona. Dale Earnhardt Jr., of course, the winner of the inaugural race in this championship so many years ago. And, you know, like you said, only a handful of these guys that are running tonight have won here, and I think we're going to be in for possibly a new winner. And this place, like you said, only one person's only won it more than once, and Ray's only won it twice, so has a tendency here to line up new race winners. I think we're going to see one, and I think it's going to be in typical amazing Daytona fashion.
There's so much to talk about tonight aside from the incredible on-track action that we're expecting to see. Obviously, the big news that premier partner Coca-Cola is refreshing this esports racing series in a multi-year entitlement partnership that makes this the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series. Our prize pool goes to $300,000, $100,000 of which goes to our eventual champion. The year is a little bit longer, Tim, 18 races to 20, and of course the final 6 races of this season will be broadcast on NBCSN. But all of that excitement still a long ways away. We're not going to crown a champion until we get out to Phoenix on November the 1st. 20 weeks of critical action for us to crown our next NASCAR champion, and it's about a minute away from getting underway.
Evan, you mentioned it. A lot of new, a lot of change. There's Ray Alfala, multi-time series champion, looking to get back up to the top and hoist that Coca-Cola iRacing Series championship. But it all starts at the same old racetrack at Daytona International Speedway. We'll see who comes out on top after 250 miles and see who ends up with the leg up when it comes to this championship fight. There's Michael Conti as well, former champion.
Some of the faces and some of the names have changed, and a lot of the colors have. 5 new teams in the series, meaning that 20 teams are representing all 40 of our competitors as we look forward to a great season of action. We're happy that you're spending a Tuesday night with us on the iRacing Esports Network as we say, let's go racing from Daytona. Round 1 of the Coke Series era is green.
Let's see as they go down into turn number 1. We saw in some of the pre-races over the last week that third line get aggressive early. We saw last night, though, drivers a lot more patient. Let's see what they're going to do, though, when it's for real through 1 and 2 for the first time. I don't see anyone looking to that third lane. Let's see if the middle or upper groove, rather, can get a run. Here comes the 46. Has a big push from the 36.
That's a big advantage. That's Jimmy Mullis now in a 46 machine, pushed by the 36. Chris Shearburn representing Letarte Esports. You do see some cars on a third lane back of the pack, somewhere around the 10 of Justin Bolton. Looks like Malik Ramey with the driver working with him. You see the 8-car Conti down on the bottom, kind of without some help as that line has strung out just a little bit, and middle line may be the place to be, but at least at the front of the field, Bobby Zalenski from pole leads lap number 1 of 2020.
Keep an eye on those Richmond Raceway Esports teammates as the inside is Zach Novak, Jimmy Mullis on the outside, and there goes Novak trying to drift up to the outside, maybe trying to help his teammate and go to that outside line. He will do so. Chris Shearburn on the inside trying to get up to your leader, Bobby Zalenski, but look at those Richmond Raceway Esports cars on the outside. Here comes the Sunoco Racing number 90, Novak trying to go to the front.
Almost clear, but not enough space to come down in the corner, so the 90 and the 46 have to stay up top. That was one of the bigger off-season stories, the fact that Zach Novak, a defending champion, makes the switch to Richmond Raceway Esports, joining Jimmy Mullis. That is going to be a dynamic duo to watch this year, and that Sunoco Toyota pushed to lead lap number 2 by the Coca-Cola Energy Toyota behind him. So the first set of teammates hooked up. I mean, the teams are going to be a big topic of conversation all season long, but especially on a plate track for the first time out. No better way to get better acquainted with a teammate as we roar down the super stretch.
Well, these two have worked together before. They've worked together in the past, and they worked together at the season opener last year at this very race. They finished 1-2. Zach Novak first, Jimmy Mullis in second. They both qualified well. They're now running under the same banner, and I think we're going to see these cars up front all day unless they choose to go to the back just to sit there and ride. Off of turn 4, working lap number 3. Novak has a bit of a run, going to try to steal this lap from Bobby, but Bobby will not be shut down this time. 9,000ths of a second to gap that time, as looks like we got a 1 Ford up top, 3 cars actually up top, trying to get that third lane working.
Yeah, we questioned if that third lane was going to come into play. It happened early in both the clash and in the shootout. It is led right now by Chris Overland. He's only about 3-4 car lengths off of the front rows for those cars down on the bottom in the middle of the racetrack. Right now being pushed by the 53 of Ryan Luza. That's a Williams Esports Ford. Tucked in line behind them, I believe that's the 14 machine of Brandon Cattell as well. So again, all of these drivers, new colors, new numbers. It's going to be a learning process for us as well up here in the booth, just as you are at home, trying to figure out where everybody is this season and how to identify them on the racetrack. But right now, that third lane only with 3 cars, so they're not able to get up alongside the Zalenski-Novak battle that is still for the race lead.
But they are making a little bit of headway as they ride side by side with the 2-car of Ray Alfalo, the 37, to the inside of Christian Chalner. So they are making a little bit of headway near the front of the field, especially on the straightaways, getting a little bit of momentum. But the top 2 grooves are the bottom 2 grooves right now as you go down into corner number 3, and that number 90 is Zach Novak trying to take it away from Bobby Zalenski as you ride on board with Corey Vincent in that second groove.
One of the cool things we're going to be bringing to you all season long is those in-sim rig shots where the right-hand side, it's the on-board, the left-hand side, you're looking at the driver in real time. Corey Vincent, calm, cool, and collected. Just 6 laps into this 100-lap contest, running exactly where he started. Again, third in line in the middle, but not space to the outside of him because that's where you'll find the nose of the 16 of Overland. Here's a different view, though. Look way back to the Coca-Cola on board of Blake Reynolds, P26, riding in line on the bottom. Maybe some of the cars at this part of the field, Randy, not wanting to mix it up quite yet. He dropped back 9 spots from the start. Maybe he doesn't want to be in the chaos this early.
Yeah, I think he's trying to get back there and hook up with some friends, or like you said, even just sit back there and roll. Let 40, 50, 60 laps tick off the board here before you get too slicey and dicey working your way through this race. Bobby Zalenski going to lead another 2.5-mile trip around the Daytona International Speedway, and still that third line, Evan, just can't quite get hooked up fast enough. They get close to the 16 of Overland up top, but just can't quite get the run he needs, get the push he needs to push him further forward up towards the other cars, the other runnings up at the head of the field, the likes of Bobby Zalenski and, of course, the 90 as well as Zach Novak. I think they need another at least 1, if not 2 cars to be a little bit stronger on that top line.
Well, this is something that we've seen over the course of these virtual speed weeks, Tim, is that outside line can get a run, even if it's just 2 cars. I mean, they can get some speed, but they do need the strength and numbers to be able to hold that ground. I mean, Chris Overland's not really going backwards with the 53 of Luza on the bumper, but that 14 of Cattell's not able to stay on them. They're not going to go forwards, that's for sure. So being stuck 5 lanes back on the outside is only so good for you. And especially with the bottom 2 lanes tight so packly together like they are, if a lane doesn't open up and a spot doesn't open up to dive down, you're either going to have to drive all the way to the front or you're going to be dropping all the way to the back with only 3 cars there. Maybe if they get some speed, a couple of other cars will bite. You go on board with the Clint Boyer race at entry of Cattell, third in line on the outside as he drafts back up to the back of the 53.
It's going to suck right back up to the back bumper of that number 53, but as you mentioned, Evan, you hit the nail on the head. They're able to keep about equidistance. They got up to the side of the 2 of Ray Alfalo, was working on Corey Vincent, really couldn't go anywhere further than that, especially with only 3 cars up there. We're also on lap number 8 into lap number 9, so give them a couple of laps and let's see who goes up to that outside line to try to challenge. Right now, those guys up in front, content to ride. Bobby Zielinski continues to hold that inside line with a push from Chris Shearburn. What a run they get in the middle of 1 and 2. Your top 2 are now on the inside line. Shearburn looks to go up high.
He does. He makes that step up to the middle lane, and he'll be pushed by Novak down the straightaway. He goes to the race lead, dives down to the bottom. Not at all shocked, though, that Novak doesn't follow. He'll stay up top with his teammate Mullis, and they'll drag race at a turn 4. I think that move by Shearburn's going to pay off, though, to be a dead heat at the stripe. Small advantage to the car on the inside line. All of a sudden, that third lane again gains a little bit of momentum. We'll see if the Overland and Luza duo could kind of get those extra 2 car lengths to make something happen here, but they lose a little bit of momentum as we go back into turns 1 and 2, Randy, which are now covered in shade. The sun is tucked away for just a little bit. That'll change things slightly with the iRacing dynamic track and weather. Things will cool off just a tad bit from where we started.
Yeah, the track temp, it was up in the 80s when these cars rolled off of pit road, and it's already dropped down into the 70s. So really cool track conditions for these guys. Going to make these cars hooked up and drive really nicely. They'll have a ton of grip. The 14 of Brandon Cattell, he's going to drop out of that third lane, meaning it's now just Overland and Luza up there. They're the only 2 drivers working that upper line, and they're likely going to slowly slide backwards here. You're meeting to see how long they can last up there. You don't want to push too hard if you're Luza, trying to stay up there near the pointy end of the field with Overland, because think back to what we saw last night in the shootout. We saw the 99 of Logan Clampett pop a motor, trying to be aggressive, pushing drivers in front of him. The last thing you want to be doing is that here in the season opener, and popping a motor in the early goings of the 100-lap opener.
Yeah, when we had the opportunity to talk to him right away, he mentioned how difficult it was to keep these cars cool. These things are trimmed out about as good as you could get them. Hours, weeks, maybe months even has gone into these setups and, trying to get these cars as dialed in as possible. Of course, maybe drivers over the course of these practice events leading up to tonight, maybe not showing their full hand of cards, and now it is a play, though, in this season opener, and we'll see, just how much leniency there is, because, of course, less tape on the nose means you're going to have better cooling, but that car's not going to be quite as sealed off, so it's all a trade-off, and these drivers, you would think, Tim, very aware of what they've got.
And one shot at the big dance. You talked about those guys maybe trying to save something, maybe trying to hold something back. We've had a couple of weeks of practice races here trying to feel out these cars, maybe these drivers feeling out their competitors, seeing what their cars have, and maybe some of them held those cards a little close to their chest as Shearburn leads his field off of corner number 4 and down towards the start-finish line. Great run by the 90 through the tri-oval. Zach Novak going to try to lead that lap, but Shearburn has it on that inside line. But now that outside line, look at that third crew pull even, trying to go down into turn number 1.
And they're continuing to dig, and the thing that surprised me here, Andy, is they didn't get anybody else from that middle line to jump up. I mean, there's always those cars who are kind of loyal to the third lane. They'll sit up there, but when they get the momentum, you'll get somebody like a Corey Vincent. I don't think the 46 is going to leave a teammate, but, Vincent, third in line on the outside. Even that 2-car, Ray Alfala, he could jump up to the outside, and they kind of jump on and tag team with that momentum. Really nobody touching the 16 or the 53 with the 10-foot pole right now. There is another car. You see 3 more cars lined up at the outside line. Colin Keister in the 17, the 23 of Casey Kerwin, and the 18 of Graham Bolin. Here come the reinforcements as that third line looks to get its first real good look so far.
And I think this upper line is going to be strong. If these guys were able to keep up the way that they could with just 2 cars, they should be really, really competitive Now that they're hooked up 5 long, there might be a 6th one attached into the back, but as I say that, one of those cars just sort of bails. The Denny Hamlin Racing entry of Casey Kerwin goes down back to the middle groove, and that's one of those things, Evan, you kind of have to pick a line and commit to it. Yeah, Casey may have picked up another spot or 2 and maybe just wanted to get back down to the middle and ride, but I think you can be in a really great spot right now if you tag that 3rd line, get the numbers up there, and I think you can probably work your way to the pointy end of the field. There's a 90 and Novak's going to lead this lap.
Some of those cars on that 3rd lane representing some of those new driver team combinations. Colin DeKeister in the 17 machine in his rookie tenure, representing Roush Fenway Gaming, teamed up with teammate Nathan Lyon in the 6 car, who is way back at about 27th position, not in the mix quite yet. It's an all-new driver lineup this year for Roush after winning the championship with Novak last season. Another driver, the 18 machine, going to duck in from that 3rd line of the middle. Graham Bolin, new face to JGR. So all these different drivers, some of them with teammates, some of them on their own right now, just 15 laps in, but so far clean and green. All 40 cars that started this race still on track and relatively within touch of this lead pack.
And you look at Ryan Luza, another one of those drivers with a new team, former champion of this series, teamed up this year at Williams Esports with Matt Busa in the 5. Busa now working the inside line, about 6 cars back. So I think that's a tandem we're going to have to watch this season. 2 very strong drivers, 2 former playoff contenders, and of course, 1 former champion in Ryan Luza. But he's pushing the 16 of Chris Overland on that outside line, and look at them make the ground. Overland to the lead down the back straightaway, but can he hold it through 3 and 4?
Problem is, he went up the 30-plus degrees of banking, and he lost all that momentum. Look at the 90 car on the inside. Even that 36 of Shearburn, they got all of that back made up in 3 to 4. Overland's going to get a bit of a run, but he's only going to be as good as P5 at that time at the start-finish line. So it is definitely all about timing your run up. You can get a great run into the quarter, but it is highly unlikely that once you go up into the banking, the outside's going to be able to gain any more ground to clear yourself. So they really need to coordinate this right there. Off a 2, push down the stretch. Lose the dough about maybe 3-4 feet off of the bumper, so he needs to get back closer to them, and that outside line once again working at a small deficit.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the things you need to be aware of getting to the end of this race, Evan. That outside line, we've not seen it in any of the practice races be able to stay even all the way around the racetrack. You really, kind of ebbs and flows momentum as they come off here at the end of this race. If you want to win on that outside line, you have to get the momentum up coming off of 4 and then get it through the trioval.
And the cool thing is, if you want to go racing 3 wide at Daytona, you don't really need to find 39 other pro iRacing drivers to do it with you, because for the first time, NASCAR Cup Series cars are available for AI competition on iRacing just in time for Speed Weeks, with the launch of the 2 biggest super speedways on the schedule in Daytona and Talladega. So if you're a member, boot up the beta UI, try it out today, and if you're looking to get involved in iRacing maybe for the first time, go to iRacing.com for more information. So we continue to see this 3-wide play out about halfway now, Tim, as you took a look earlier at the race analysis. We're about halfway through what a fuel run would be in this race right now as 18 laps go behind us.
And if this race stays green, we saw it a couple of years ago when Nick Ottinger went to victory lane in this race, where they kind of tried to play the race a little bit backwards. Caution flag comes out late, so I'm not sure how the strategy is going to play out, but with it being 33 to 38 laps, they have a couple laps of buffer room to play with, Evan. So we'll see if this race has that green flag look to it. You might see some drivers play a different pit strategy than going all the way to 38, maybe trying to stretch it to the top of that and go maybe 40 laps or so. So there's going to be a couple of strategies. I just have a feeling. But right now, this race has that green flag look to it. Everybody's content to ride. And as you mentioned, about halfway or so, or just a little bit more to that first green flag pit stop we're going to see this evening as you ride on board with Casey Kerwin on the outside line.
It's great timing for the Denny Hamlin Race It entry. Again, one of the new teams to this series, because I was just about to mention, look at that plus minus. Started 36th position. He runs right now in 12th on the racetrack, so he has made up a ton of time. So Casey Kerwin on the charge. We've got the likes of Colin DeKeister as well, somebody who's gained a handful of positions, going 37th to 11th. Ryan Luza, 20th position to 8th, as we challenge 3 wide for the race lead once more. Despite the fact that this racetrack's been pretty much clogged from the start, doesn't mean that cars have been unable to make their way through the field, because we've seen a handful of big movers in the first fifth of this race as 20 laps go behind us this time by.
Yeah, the 90 Zach Novak there was nearly clear of the 36, but once again, we've seen Zach show that he's committed to his teammate. The 46 of Mullis did not drop down in front of that 36 car. Chris Shearburn, 16 of Overland as well. Got a great run coming down the back straightaway. Look there, 23 of Kerwin going up to that upper line, working that third groove as well. So 4 cars strong again up there. I do see another car tagging them back about 6 or 7 car lengths off that 4th car in line, trying to get there and make it 5 strong. But here we go. They're going to be nearly even entering turn 3 once again.
Yeah, 3 sets of 2 race off into turn number 3. It is the 16 still being pushed by the 53, so Overland and Luza. The Richmond Raceway duo still in the middle of Novak and Mullis. The bottom line still sees Shearburn being pushed by the 83 of Bobby Zelensky, who started this race on pole position. Shearburn was second in line behind him, then made a step up to the middle line, got pushed around. That's how he got his Latar Esport Chevy to the race lead, where it has sat pretty comfortably, I would say, ever since then. The 90 car leading that middle lane hasn't looked like he's been trying to clear the 36 and cut down. Again, I think valuing sticking with his teammate more than just kind of get it out on his own. We'll see if that holds true as this run continues to work on. But that third lane is getting some of those reinforcements. The one car that Randy saw trying to get up to the outside, I believe, was Malik Ray, but he's unable to really blend right in, so he drops back down to the middle. There's the on-board shot, though, with Zach Novak second on track, leading the middle. He'll be off for the race lead, that time by just 16 1/1000ths.
He looks focused right now on that middle groove, and he really has to be. Look at that outside line. There's a little bit of a connect from Luza back to Colin Keister right now. There's a couple of car lengths there. They need a couple more bodies up there, Evan, to really push that line towards the front of the field, and they lost a little bit of it right there, and especially when they're not tucked up tight, they're not going to get that run that Overland got a few laps ago as they dive it down into corner number 3, the 16 of Overland to the outside. That Wood Brothers Racing ride trying to get up there, make a little bit of ground, but I think they need a little more help. We'll see if they get it before they get that first round of green flag pit stops kicked off.
It was a really good static shot on the wall there as they came into turn 4, because, as we watch the 3 wide up at the front of the field, even if the drivers just consider this to be riding around, again, they're not really pinching on each other, Randy. Nobody's really pushing too much in the corner. It's about as calm of 3 wide as you can see. It's still nerve-wracking. When you step up half a lane, go down half a lane, there's very little room for error, but you saw that big, stretched-out, single-file line behind. I think that's a combination of drivers knowing, hey, we're just a little bit over 10 laps away from pit stops, but also I don't really need to be 3 wide right now. I can't win the race at lap 24, as Tim mentioned off at the top. Can't win it early. You can lose it early, though. So you saw that everybody throughout the field and the intervals are at the top of your screen, even though they're strung out. All those single-file cars, I think, back there by design.
Yeah, and especially coming up on pit stops, Evan, we saw one of the practice races in the last week or so, drivers not get themselves single-filed out before pit stops, and we saw people trying to get to pit road from even the second and third line, and that didn't work out. Same thing happened in the 500 last year in the real season opener. Had some teams and drivers that were trying to sort of keep that info hidden of when they were hitting pit road, and it caused some issues. Saw the same thing here in the simulated world of iRacing, and it caused some problems. So I think now people have that experience that didn't go so well in the practice races over the course of the past week. Drivers are being a lot more committed to try to get to that bottom line before we get to the pit stop window. And even though 33 to 38 laps is what you can do on a tank of fuel, really the window opens in a couple of laps that keeps you in that 2-stop window. Probably around lap 29, lap 30 is going to be the earliest portion of that window you could conceivably come down.
Yeah, you just need to make it about 33 or 34 laps if this race were to run itself green to split it into thirds and do a 2-stop strategy. You'd pit about lap 33, you pit at 66, and that's going to keep you well within the fuel window. So there is that little bit of leeway this way or that way. The problem is, next week, and for most of these races, Tim, we're going to be talking about teams and drivers working together, trying to, get away from the other strategy of these other cars and trying to not share that information. It's different at Daytona, and we'll see this if green flag pit stops play out as you go on board with Malik Ray there, the Joe Gibbs Racing driver, tucked in that middle lane, because you can't pit with nobody or you're not going to have any drafting help. But the more cars you pit with, the sketchier it is getting it down from about 190 miles an hour off of the corner down to pit road speed here of 60.
And we've seen the varying strategies before here at Daytona. we can't say that we're not going to see it because we don't know how the cautions are going to play out. We're not sure who's going to pit with who and how that all plays out. We're going to find out really shortly within the next 10 laps or so who is going to pit with who and what strategy we're going to have. But the one thing that I also took from the clash earlier this week, Evan, is that the first half of the race, we really didn't see a whole lot of changing unless you went to the outside line movement. Guys like Colin Keister started deep in the field in 37th. He's up in the top 10 and he's working that outside line. A lot of these drivers that are on those bottom two grooves started within the top 10 or so, and they still run within the top 10 or thereabouts. Saw Ray Alfala duck to that inside line. He's now running fourth on the inside. He's trying to make some headway with that virtual racing school number 2, but right now still not able to make a whole lot of room, and we're a few laps away from pit stops. That's really where we saw the first shakeup, per se, from the starting grid when we ran the clash last week.
And we'll see if there's going to be any indications of drivers, a few laps before that decision to come down to the pit lane. Maybe they abandoned that third lane. But, if on that 53 Luz at the 16 of Overland, those have been the two tried and tested cars. There's 4 up there with Keister and the 23 of Kerwin joining them. But, those 2 lead cars up top have been there basically all night long. You're not going to be able to pit from the third lane. So do you bite the bullet, jump back in line? That's a pretty long middle line, though, still. About 9 or 10 rows deep worth of cars. If they drop the back without trying to squeeze in line, you're giving up a ton of track position, but pit stops are not going to work from the outside line. So you've got about 7 or so laps, I would guess, to figure it out. There's a big push that time down the back straightaway. Keister bails. He drops to the middle. It was a big run with Luza and Overland. Once more, Tim able to get to the nose, but unable to get all the way through. So, Randy, that's a recurring problem for the cars up top is they have speed in 2, and look at that, pit stops early down pit road. Chris Shearburn, Bobby Zelensky, and 4 more, I think, down on the pit lane.
Yeah, it's a mix of Chevys and Toyotas. They come down pit road here. Shearburn, Zelensky, Crowder, Challoner, and Leahy is going to be the roll call. So all these drivers are going to come down on pit road here. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. We saw this in the clash. We saw a group come down early, about a group this size, and it didn't work out for them in that 50-lap race. But I have a feeling that it's going to be a much different situation here in this one, knowing that this the entire rest of the field is going to be hitting pit road here in the next 5 or 6 or so laps. As a result of this, everyone has gotten themselves double filed out. That third line no longer exists. As you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, cars going to be merging back up onto the racetrack. And let's see, any more takers? The answer is going to be no. The rest of the field wanting to run the tank a little bit more bone dry.
And I think that it makes more sense. I think that the cars coming down to the pit lane are the surprise in all of this. But to the point that Randy was making there, Tim, there's only 5 of them down on the pit lane that just pitted. Shearburn, Zelensky, Crowder, Challoner, and Keegan Leahy. There's going to be speed if they all work together, but they're going to be nowhere near as fast as this lead pack. So even if this lead pack separates into small groups, that group that just pitted is losing time for every single lap that this big pack you're looking at stays out on the racetrack. There's one lone car on the outside line. It's the 51 Rowdy Energy Toyota. That is Malik Ray, who started in 33rd. He's literally the only car up top as Chris Overland clears for the race lead. He tucks down in front of the 90 car. First time that Ford is down on the inside.
And you saw with that last shot, the pack of 5 in front of your leaders as Malik Ray on the outside line kind of fades back, and now to that second group. I'm kind of surprised there wasn't more drivers come down onto pit road on lap 30, kind of split this up into thirds or so, but right now Overland leading this thing. You got Novak right in behind, Jimmy Mullis, those Richmond Raceway eSports drivers tucked in tight, but these drivers are going to have to come down within the next 5 laps or so unless they stretch it a little bit further. We'll see if anybody decides to dart down onto pit road this time and kick off what would be the second round of pit stops, and it looks like most of these drivers are staying north of pit road, so they're going to come across the line with Overland leading the pack.
Now we look at the lap times to see just how much time actually the cars that pitted are losing. Chris Overland, the leader last time by the start-finish line, ran a 45.524. The lead car in that other group, a 44.9. So in fact, the coordination is working for that 5-car group. This is not what we have seen in speed weeks. They have not been able to coordinate, and it looks like with drivers switching out that this may be doable, maybe not long-term, but just to hold it steady for the time being. So maybe that early pit strategy is not going to be what sinks you early on. Race leaders once more cycling out of turn 4. Still no takers for lead pack that is 35 cars deep.
Yeah, and this group of 5 drivers that did that, they're perfectly executed their rundown onto pit road, getting the pit stops done. No one slid their box, and they have this executed. We need to get the cameras pointed at this, because what this group of 5 is doing is whoever gives to the head of this little train of cars is moving up to the middle when they start losing momentum, and then the back car at the tail end of the train is actually catching that car as they fall back. And in essence, no one's losing any time. This is one of the most intricate sort of pit strategies I've ever seen on one of these plate races, and the way this group of 5 is managing this is awesome. Their pace is great as they continue to run away from the rest of the field.
And it looks like 5 different drivers representing 5 different teams in that mix, but it is very well orchestrated, as now Zelensky, the lead car in that group, is going to drop back. Shearburn's going to pick him up, rinse, wash, and repeat. We're closing in, though, on the rest of the field to come down to pit lane as we see and await the first full cycle of green flag pit stops. The 5 cars at the back of the pack have already come down and in. The top 35 still holding strong. Exactly, in fact, 35 laps in to the season opener of this eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. We'll step aside for a moment. A lot more still to come as your race leaders come down pit lane. Here they go. It's Overland side by side with Luza 3 wide behind. I think they got him down in time.
Energy!
I am first, the place where it all started. I am dreams coming true, and nightmares too. The place where the season begins. I am 101,000 hearts skipping a beat. I am wide open, faster than fast, predictably unpredictable. I am the wind that beats all other winds. I am what you've been waiting for, and I am about to go off. I am the Daytona 500. I am NASCAR.
You saw it all in our Coca-Cola nonstop as pit stops continue here from Daytona. This portion of tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official fan refreshment of eNASCAR. Pit stops continuing to cycle through. Justin Bolton had become the race leader. He just brought his pack down to the pit lane, and I think that may just about cycle all of this through. You're watching a battle on a high banks of turns 3 and 4. Corey Vincent, pushed by the 90 of Novak, gets around the 9 of Eric J. Smith and company, but I think you got to look further up the road, maybe to the 16 of Chris Overland, to find the battle for the race lead. We will see some slow cars on the pit lane who are just now blending back out. Let's see where they end up now as everybody's completed service.
And all these drivers, except for 5, pitted within about 4 laps or so frantically down on pit road. Few drivers coming back out onto the racetrack, including the number 21 of Garrett Lowe. You saw the 88 of Brad Davies on the apron as well. So it looks like for the most part, everybody has come down to pit road, has got their service clean and green, and we'll see who comes through this and who are the big losers and the big winners. We saw it in the Clash in some of these practice races where pit stops really shook up the running order, but not only do we have one pit stop tonight, we're going to have one more in this 100-lap distance.
So we're able to cleanly execute the first exchange of green flag pit stops. That is everybody having completed service. It looks like Brian Schoenberg, Kane Cook, and I think maybe Dylan Duval, maybe just Duval, the cars that lose touch with this lead pack. You can see everybody else up front is grouped back up, and it is in fact Overland just shy of taking over the net race lead because Christian Challoner on the bottom holds it strong. But man, Randy, we saw it on that split screen there. Some of those drivers were really pushing the limits getting down to pit road.
Yeah, there were a couple crazy cycles as drivers come down pit road. Really, the second big group that hit was really the majority of the field. There were a handful of cars that decided to go one lap later, and there was a couple people that were up on the racetrack trying to get down towards pit road that were merging out wide, letting cars that were going at speed by them before they then cut all the way across the racetrack below that double yellow line. As we're starting to see that upper line try and get formed up, and as they say that, the 18 of Graham Bolin, who was up there leading that outer line, he finds an opening and he drops into the middle. The middle groove going to get a big run. The 46 now pushing the 16. Jimmy Mullis not hooked up with his teammate anymore, and Overland not quite going to get clear of Challoner as they go into 3.
That was an interesting dynamic there because it was the Denny Hamlin racing car of Kerwin pushing the Joe Gibbs Racing Toyota of Bolin. And Denny's driver kind of bailed on the 18 there, or vice versa, I guess. Bolin dropped down. Casey did the same thing a little bit earlier, and now he's working with the Donnie. They've got a ton of speed, rocking it up the outside line. They're going to be able to get even with the race leaders. We've seen this happen a few times tonight, but can they get that extra car length? In fact, a half a car length advantage, but unable to clear. And now we'll see what happens to that duo up top. Looks like they've got Keister a little bit further behind. Luza in line as well as Cattell.
They had a huge run on the outside line, did Casey Kerwin, but it looked like there was a few more coming through there to help he and Zach Novak. It's kind of disintegrated a little bit on that outside line, but if they can continue to do what they have done, Ryan Luza bringing on Brandon Cattell, if they can hook up, get that momentum, we might see a lead change on that outside line. Casey Kerwin once again getting that run on the outside. Chris Overland will lead that lap. Christian Challoner always strong when we come to these super speedways on that inside line. What a battle. 3 wide, stacked 4 deep for the top spot as we work lap 42.
Well, for the Nani machine here now of Novak, it puts him in an interesting position, Randy, because for the better part of this night, he had been being pushed by his teammate. His teammate is directly on his left-hand side, so Novak hasn't really had to do much of monitoring the temps on that Sunoco Toyota at all tonight. I know Luza has been a pusher for the better part of the evening. His Williams Esports Ford, third in line on the outside, and I guess he's doing it all right because we took that look at his sim rig and on board with him, and his face was not lit up red, so nothing was blinking through that first run. We'll see how they can manage them now at lap number 43 of 100. The outside there, and look at the dice to the inside. Jimmy Mullis steps out from behind Overland. He'll now drop to the inside and take over the race lead.
Really interesting decision there by Overland. I would have thought he would have wanted to go down to the bottom too, but he was 3-4 car lengths clean, and he didn't drop down. He's going to get another big head of steam, and he's going to do it this time. I think he could have done a little bit earlier, but the 51 of Malik Gray, we saw the announcement from Kyle Busch that Rowdy Energy going to be swinging that number 51 entry, and well, he's going to try to work his way forward here. He'll be leading this outside line, and Overland trying to play both lanes, but he's going to get split. Malik, seeing that, reacts lightning quick, and Malik Gray is going to lead lap number 44.
Maybe pun intended, because it was the Interstate Batteries green number 18 Machida Bolin who followed his teammate up to the outside. Those Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas worked together there, but it may be short-lived because Ray drops to the inside. Bolin holds the middle. He'll now get pushed by Overland a little bit too much as he bobbles as they are all over each other down the super stretch. Bolin's able to tuck down in line and get back tucked up with the 51 car. So those JGR Toyotas end up together once more after dicing it up with the Wood Brothers 16.
You start to feel a little bit of that sense of urgency. Some of these drivers up in front now get to take that deep breath and maybe try to regroup a little bit as Graham Bolin on the inside going to take the opportunity to hop to the top of the leaderboard. Overland in that 16 on that middle groove trying to get a little push from another forward in Colin Keister, and Malik Ray trying to push his teammate a little further out towards the front of the field as you ride on board with Jimmy Mullis down the back straightaway, getting close to that Rowdy Energy Camry.
And Mullis right now third in line on the inside in that number 46 machine. Basically been a top 5 car all night long, but some new faces entering the mix. How about the 33 car, the beneath entry of Michael Guest? He's third in line on the outside in that 33 Chevrolet. He has not really been up in the mix quite yet this evening. Started 18th position, so it wasn't like he was way back in the pack, but he's looking to represent there in the middle. He's working with Overland for the moment as the outside's got some speed. Keister tucks down, and he'll now take charge of the middle line in his Facetol Mustang.
Some of the newest names that have risen to the top in this eNASCAR championship over the years starting to find their way to the front of the field. Colin Keister in this championship. Didn't run last year. He leads the 23 of Casey Kerwin on the outside up top leading. Graham Bolin on the bottom leading. Overland gives a bit of a shove to the 17. The Roush teammates, they need to play nicely with one another, and they currently are as they come off of turn 4. Overland's going to bail on his teammate as they work through, coming to the tri-oval. They're going to be nose to nose across all 3 lanes, but I think Colin Keister is going to lead that lap just 13 100ths of a second. Separated your top 3 as they came across the stripe that time, and man, oh man, this is getting really aggressive, Evan. You got Roush cars that aren't playing nicely with each other. You got Gibbs cars that are hooked up quite calmly, and you got the Denny Hamlin Racing entry up there in the 23 as well that's working, I think, with that group a little bit also. This has become a really spicy battle pack for the point.
And that 17 machine is clear to the bottom. Does he dive down? No, he doesn't. Either he didn't want to, or there was too much hesitation. But Keister is going to hold that middle line. So it's Bolin leading the bottom. Keister leads the middle, and Overland leads that very outside. This 3 wide is not a shock at all. I mean, we've seen it from the get-go, but certainly these drivers a little bit more aggressive on the pushing. You've got a lot of wiggles on the quarter exit, and that is, I think, the big thing that stands out this run compared to that prior as we close in on halfway, Tim, as these drivers are really starting to push that envelope.
They're closing in on halfway, and they're also closing in on that second round of pit stops, so you really have to figure out where you are, who you're pushing, and who you're working with as we continue on down into corner number 3. These drivers 3 wide, and now Overland trying to use that outside groove.
He is going to try to spearhead that effort. He's got friends up there. Of course, Leahy's been up there for the better part of the night, so has Luza. Novak kind of stuck up there. We'll see if he's one of the drivers who is more inclined to just kind of drop down ASAP. How about another new face up into the mix here? The Logitech G entry of Nick Ottinger, the 25 car. Started P12, so he's basically running where he started, but up in the mix here as the 16 car tucks in front of him.
Yeah, everyone's getting too wide because they see this number 41 of Dylan Duvall, who is going to be the first car of the season to go 1 lap down, and everyone panic merging down to get too wide, and that looked like it was about to be tight, and they might go 3-4 wide trying to fight with that lap traffic. But yeah, the Wood Brothers entry of Chris Overland wisely getting down in the middle, and the moment he sees that lap traffic go away, that 16 is already eyeing that 3rd lane. I think the 14 is going to go with him. Here comes that 3rd groove. The 25 of Ottinger's thinking about making it work as well.
It is on as next time by we'll be halfway home from Daytona. Let's get an update with our Coca-Cola Racing family now as we're halfway distance in this Daytona 250. Casey Kerwin and Keegan Leahy, the Denny Hamlin Racing drivers, right now running 15th and 10th on the racetrack. And then our second duo, the Team Dillon Esports cars. We were just talking about Blake Reynolds, 22nd, but Michael Guest, the driver who we had just mentioned, running in 4th position right now. So they are spread all throughout the field, and certainly, especially when you talk about not only those 4 together, but the 2 sets of 2 teammates, they want to find each other before this thing is all said and done. All that momentum for the outside, though, kind of sputters out. 50 laps down, 50 laps to go.
And now we get into that second half of this race, Evan. We'll try to figure out who ends up in front and who ends up winning here at Daytona. But up in front, Brandon Cattell has put himself in a position, was running that high line earlier, now to the inside line. But here come the Joe Gibbs Gaming guys to the middle groove, trying to make something happen.
And they've got a big push. Both of them clear to the inside. So is Keister. Malik Ray is going to be the driver who drops down to the inside. And we saw this a few laps ago where they didn't make those moves together, diving to the inside or diving to the outside. But eventually they had faith that they would get hooked back up. And I guess you could argue, Randy, that right here might even be better than nose to tail, because as they run separated, they control both the inside and the middle.
Yeah, you're right about that. They can control multiple lanes from where they're at, and they don't have to merge up and merge down trying to do it. We saw that in the race last night. A couple drivers trying to control both lanes, would come off the bottom off, say, turn 2, turn 4, and if they didn't time it right, they would open up that bottom line, and we saw a couple people lose the lead that way. This way, if you want to work his teammates and really control that, you're really not risking anything here, but it's sort of an interesting way this race has developed, Evan. The first half of this race, it looked a lot more like the race we saw last week. You couldn't really make anything work from that bottom line. There wasn't any crazy, changes for position. Everything was, you were kind of locked into where you were. Last night, the second half of this race is starting to form up to be a lot more last night, where there's a lot more dicing in and out of that bottom line, trying to get up to the middle and push your way clear of that car at the head of the field. So drivers being much more aggressive as the laps continue to tick off, as we're just over halfway.
I think a lot is a very appropriate word, because there is a lot on the line in this 2020 campaign. Not only are we talking about a $300,000 purse at the end of the season, but there's $3,000 up for grabs tonight alone. $1,500 to the driver who takes home the checkered flag, $1,000 to second place, and $500 to third. So I know that Tim Terry, P4, would feel nice at a season opener, but knowing that the drivers on the podium are walking away with cash money in their back pocket tonight is going to make that race, I think, that much more exciting to the end. Be real interested if you got a set of teammates in the mix there as well.
Absolutely, it does. You want to come away with a little bit of cash in your pocket to really start off this season. We talk about this sport of stock car racing, whether it is in the eNASCAR series or whether it's in the NASCAR Cup series you're going to see on Sunday at Daytona. Yes, it's the big show, but it's also momentum to carry yourself throughout the season. 20 races is a long way to go. If you can get your momentum now and have a little bit of pocket change in the back pocket, that's going to help as well, as Malik Ray continues to lead this thing around. Malik's come close in the last year to winning one of these races. He's trying in his sophomore season to really kick it off with a victory. He's got a teammate up on the second groove as well, and there's Chris Overland, veteran of this series, hasn't gone to victory lane yet. Tonight could very well be that night.
Could it be a breakthrough? Like we mentioned, we've seen 10 different race winners and 11 starts all time in this series here at Daytona. But as we work lap number 55, I know it feels like we're just removed from it, but we need to start thinking about pit stops to the end of this race, maybe be it about 10 laps away from now. Some drivers pitted early, rated about, in fact, just shy of lap 30. Again, 38 is about the max on the fuel window. If you can go 33 on every run, you'll get the distance. So, of course, therefore, rated around lap number 65 or so, would open that window to make it the distance in this race. You would expect that group of 5 cars that pitted early are going to have to pit earlier if the rest of the field stays out beyond their fuel window. So we'll see how it shakes out. I know it's 10 laps away and a lot can happen in that time, but don't be surprised if you start to see drivers positioning themselves and that big single file line trail off with a little bit of 3 wide. That has been a constant and a staple at the front of the pack all night.
Yeah, and the thing about that group that you mentioned, Evan, that came down pit road early, we know the fuel window is 33 to 38 laps, so they're going to be hoping to hit that 38 and be able to go from there. And it's sort of a short middle stint they're trying to set themselves up for, going from, I think it was going to be like lap 29 to lap 62. Not a super long middle stint, but you don't really need to have a long middle stint as long as you can get that fuel to go to the end. I will say, Evan, I like having a little bit of extra fuel in the bank. We know that you have the green-white checkered finishes in this race. First time I believe we've seen it in the season opener in this championship. If I'm any of those drivers, I don't want to come down on lap number 62 knowing that there's a risk that we could go into overtime. I want to come down lap 65, maybe even push it a little bit closer to lap 70 before I pit, so that I know I have enough fuel in the tank should we go to overtime, and I don't have to come down pit road and get a splash and give up a big chunk of track position knowing we're only coming to a 5-lap restart.
We just saw an onboard shot with Steve Sheehan in the McDonald Chevrolet. That's one of 4 drivers competing in this year's eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, Tim, that while he wasn't competing last season, is not a rookie. We have 5 true rookies in the series and 4 returning drivers. So Sheehan, Bolton, Allen, and Gorlinski are all drivers, a handful of them race winners in this series, that are making a return to the top of the iRacing mountain this season. Sheehan, a veteran, hanging out in the back, still trying to buy his time. You're on board with Wood Brothers Racing Ford of Chris Overland. He's been real well acquainted with that safer barrier on the outside, and he's got his best friend with him again, the 5 of Matt Busa, pushing on the bumper. So we'll swap out which Williams Esports Ford it is behind, but he does have drafting help as 2 cars on the very top.
And you mentioned some of those rookies or newer faces to this series. Hard to believe that Steve Sheehan, he won a race back in 2010 when we started off this series, and now back in the mix and in the fray. Jeremy Allen, former winner here at Daytona. You want to talk about a super speedway guru. Jeremy Allen won a share of super speedways in his day, also won at the Talladega Super Speedway in his first stint in this eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. You ride on the bumper of Corey Vincent as you look up, trying to make some room and make some headway on that inside line as the field comes out of corner number 4, 2 and 3 wide throughout, as we will complete lap number 59. Graham Boland trying to maintain that lead on the middle groove.
He did really good 2 weeks ago. In fact, in one of the unofficial practice races that these drivers had, worked real well with his teammate and ran up front all night. He's doing that so far in this Daytona 250. But for all of the allegiances that we've seen, it is really JGR carrying the flag for the sets of tandems as you go on board with the car in that 3rd lane coming up the back. That is the 97 machine of John Gorlinski. You want to talk about drivers who have had some success to kick off this unofficial campaign. Clash winner for Kyle Larson Racing Esports a week ago.
Yeah, in the clash that we saw, I think only 1 car actually avoided that wreck, and it wasn't John Gorlinski, and he was still able to pull off the win there. And John Gorlinski, a ton of experience in this championship. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And Tim talked about how we've had so many of these drivers that had maybe stopped racing over the years that, you know, with the stakes coming up, you're starting to see a lot of those old names creep back. And I think it's great, Evan. It's almost a decade of sim racing now represented in this championship. People from the really, really early roots 10 years ago are starting to work their way back in the series, and a lot of the newer, younger kids that are even just coming up out of high school, like Zach Novak comes to mind there, of course, going from a night series champion, having to be 16 years old to run in that, and then coming into winning the championship last year. It's great to see the diversity in the ages start to work out from a lot of these guys across all 40 of these competitors.
And I did say off at the top, Tim, to be fair, that it would be a learning process for all of us. That's the William Byron Esports entry of John Gorlinski. Listen, there's a lot of NASCAR Cup Series affiliated and iRacing drivers having teams in this series. A couple of the new 5 teams that we've seen join. So not to cheap out Willie B there, but that's William Byron Esports with the 97 of Gorlinski. He's teamed up with Nick Ottinger. The Kyle Larson duo, as we've talked about, is Sheehan and Bob Bryant. But either way, that car is up into the mix. Some more cars to the very outside. How about the 9 machine on the top, Eric J. Smith? You want to talk about all the change? Well, yeah, that car does look a little bit different. That is the same driver lineup this season for Jim Beaver Esports, with Smith and Guerrilla teamed up once more, and a 9 car into the mix now after starting P26.
We mentioned one William Byron Esports teammate. How about Nick Ottinger? Ottinger has put himself back into the fray. He is the 4th driver in that middle groove below Eric Smith, battling for a position. Ottinger has won here before Daytona, and he used pit strategy and fuel strategy to get himself to the front in that race 2 years ago. He's won a ton of races in this series. I think we really have to watch him, and right now he's put himself in a position to be in contention for that final round of pit stops, which should start here within the next 5 or 10 laps or so. Keep an eye on Ottinger in that Logitech William Byron Esports car. I think he's got something, Evan.
Well, you want to talk about the duos, that 2 car of Ray Alfala working the outside line. Of course, we talked about the up and downs that he's had, the only multi-time champion in series history, let alone the 4-time series champion back behind the wheel of that number 2 machine that he had grown to be so accustomed with. His teammate Bobby Zelensky started up front, remember, started on pole position in this race and was so very good in the early laps. But that 83 car after the pit cycle is running in his VRS entry back in 21st spot. So he has not been one of the drivers who picked up. So we'll see if they're able to cycle this thing out after the second and hopefully only cycle the green flag pit stops still to come. Graham Boland's going to challenge Malik Ray as we put 64 laps behind us at Daytona, a race that everybody wants to win.
Yeah, if you kick your season off well with Daytona, you got a nice bunch of points, and you can just keep. You're not starting behind the 8 ball if you have a bad race there. So if you can start off with a good result, even a win, it's one of the biggest races of the year. So
that would be amazing. I think Daytona 500 is like the biggest race event of the year, and other than the last race for the championship, obviously, that would be amazing to win.
Daytona can make or break your season just off emotion alone. Just winning that will carry you all the way into the playoffs.
Normally for me, I normally start the season off at Daytona with a wrecked car. So if I could win that race and start the season off on top would be great. I think that would really help us throughout the season with momentum.
Winning Daytona means that you go into the rest of the year knowing you proved yourself in the first race, but you have to continue to prove yourself all year long. It's just a drive to do better all year.
So to win there would just mean so much to me. I love restrictor plates. I feel like that's my strong suit.
And back live from Daytona International Speedway, you saw it there, a group of cars diving down to the pit lane at lap number 65. This final portion of tonight's broadcast is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official fan refreshment of eNASCAR. More cars hard on the brakes getting down and into the pit lane. This time it is a trio of cars in for service. Not a big group, but it is Ottinger, Clampett, and Gorlinski.
Yeah, Tim was just talking about those William Byron Esports cars, and the two of them come down together along with the 99 of Logan Clampett. So we've had about 8 or 9 cars that came down with the first group, a trio there, and it's about half the field that we're still waiting on, maybe more like 3/4 of the field. We're still waiting on to see what they decide to do. Of course, depending on what you were doing on fuel strategy, Evan, if you ran late, you could potentially push lap 74, 75, 76 on gas here. Let's see what people are going to do off of turn 4 this time, and we have no takers to the pit road. And important to remember that this second pit stop is often the one that will see the biggest mistakes of the race. I think back to the season opener last year, and Michael Guest, who was in the 17 at the time, that time last season, he was in a position to potentially win that race, Evan, and he spun the car coming down on towards pit road. The pressure can really start getting to you, especially for some of these new drivers here in the season opener, what could be the money pit stop.
The main pack is on the left-hand side of your screen there. On the right-hand side, you can see one of the duos that came down to the pit lane, and there is a speed difference. The bigger pack that pitted first, 5 cars, faster than those 3. I think they're all really going to merge into one pack, which if they can coordinate well, will help. Here come the leaders, though. Malik Ray charges pit road. It's a pack of 5 cars, and he may have been speeding.
Yeah, it may have been a little bit hot for Malik Ray coming down onto pit road, but now Chris Overland will assume the lead. We've got Eric Smith in behind him, Brandon Cattell, Ray Alfala. We've got some big, heavy hitters still yet to come down onto pit road for their final stop of this event. We'll see if they can get on pit road cleanly.
The cars that he pitted with are headed out, but Malik Ray is parked in the pit stall. A speeding violation on a pit road entry is going to cost that Rowdy Energy Toyota tons of precious seconds. You know, those 5 seconds doesn't sound like a lot, but at Daytona, the draft is gone. He's on his own, and he's going to have to really hope to find some stray cars to draft with to make up for that. The race leaders, though, still out in front. They decide not to come down to the pit lane that time through, and in fact, they picked up some stragglers. Your race leader is that 16 of Overland, third in line. So he's right now pushing Bob Bryant and Steve Sheehan. That duo, technically, the last 2 cars on the lead lap, working together right now. They pitted 4 laps ago.
Is that the commentator's curse I just gave him, Evan? I start talking about mistakes on pit road, and Malik comes down, and he's the only one to really get bit by one at the moment. That said, the likes of Brian and Sheehan, strategy definitely didn't go their way with the way that they've kind of come off of pit road here. I will say that group that came down pit road early, actually I was about to say that, Keegan Leahy nearly going around on the entry into one. We got a group of about 10, 11, 12 cars here grouped up. This was your first pack that you see your race leaders all coming down on towards pit road. The 32 nearly getting sent around entering turn one while these guys were trying to work together. I was going to say that these guys once again executed their pit stops very, very well and got grouped up, but nearly a mistake coming from this group nearly took them all out.
It was awfully sketchy, 3 wide. You could see the smoke as they locked him up. But Tim, I suppose if you're not locking up the tires to the very last second, then it's not a good pit stop. I mean, you got to get everything you can out of it, so I'd call that a success. You see Smith on the left-hand side with the push from Overland, along with Alfala, Cattell, Reynolds, looks like Santiago Tires. You got Nathan Lyon, Michael Grillia, Justin Bolton, that whole pack single filed out on the apron. The race lead pack is going to cycle on by them, though, out there in the draft. Actually, that's Zelensky's pack. So these is a group of race cars that have already come down.
You really have to push it and be on the edge of out of control coming down onto your pit stop. And as we mentioned, it looks like everybody has come down onto pit road. You saw the last of those cars last time by peel off. So trying to cycle back through here and see who ends up at the top. But Bobby Zelensky leading this pack off of corner number 4. Coming down across the stripe, Keegan Leahy hops to the outside. The 32 car has something to say.
More cars in and out of the pit lane. That may button up the pit strategy. So as they work the apron, this pack out on track is going to pass them. It's led by the 21 of Michigan Garrett Lowe. Look at the speed difference to those cars who are already back out and up to speed. Blew by them like they were standing still. So that group that pitted at lap number 66 is going to be the group of race cars that cycle through, I believe, to the race lead now inside of the final 30.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about perfect execution. That entire group that's currently leading this race, you see the likes of the 32 in there, the 83 in that mix as well. I mean, that might be the most flawless execution of a group of people that are working together, getting onto and off a pit road, then getting grouped up and being able to outpace the leaders and open a gap. It's hard to do that here at the plate tracks, but they managed it, and they turned what was a race of really one big pack of cars into 2 or maybe even 3 distinct packs here as they run. Now the big question here is, Evan, can that second pack chase down the first group, or are we going to get a caution in the next 27 laps that is going to erase that margin because people are going to stop playing so nice with each other, I'd say in about 10 laps time?
Yeah, it is a little bit strung out. That second pack definitely has some work to do. Blake Reynolds is kind of the cut line as he was running in 16th position. You can see the battle for the lead. There's the second pack on the right-hand side. It's 17th position on back. They need to catch up. That's a long way to go, though. Your race leader's running a 45.2. It was a 44.8 for a car in that second pack. So at least the last time by, they were fast enough. But they need to maintain that speed, Tim. They are 3.1 seconds behind.
And if this thing stays green, going to be a very interesting strategy to see what happens with that second pack. Look at Chris Shearburn on the outside. Shearburn has help from Smith and Overland as they work that outside line. That third groove really starting to come into play, but Nick Ottinger in that second groove trying to take it away from Keegan Leahy on the inside. These guys up in front are getting busy. That second pack trying to close back in.
They are certainly not waiting around for that second pack to get into the conversation. They know that this right here is now the battle for the race win, and not only critical points on what will be a 16-race regular season to hope to fight for the Coca-Cola iRacing Series Championship later this year, but as we mentioned earlier, $3,000 getting paid out to the top 3 finishers tonight alone. It is a big head of steam for Chris Shearburn, but it was about a die cast's worth of space too short from clearing, so he's not able to come down in front of the 25. It is still Ottinger leading the middle line.
Well, you're the expert on diecast, Evan, so I'll trust your judgment on the amount of space that was there. But this lead group is doing well. We saw there were a couple laps where that second pack was reeling in about 6, 7, 8 tenths of a second thereabouts. that pace has since evened off. The second pack is still maybe slightly quicker, but it's by less than 1/10 of a second a lap. It's a couple hundreds here, a few hundreds there, and that second group will not catch this lead group at that pace. They need something big, be it an accident or maybe to find some sort of speed some way, somehow to be able to catch that. And if that doesn't happen, someone from this, 16-car group is going to be the one who wins this race.
And of course, just because those cars behind are not fighting for the race lead doesn't mean they're not aggressive. I mean, that is a side-by-side pack. If they're unable to close in and that goes on any longer, they're going to start to, more desperate, and they're going to be fighting over these mid-pack positions, a point per spot, like they would be battling for a spot inside of the top 5 or the top 10. They get it down to 2.9 seconds, so it's plausible. But they really need to figure it out. You see at the top of the screen, 24 laps to go at Daytona. Right now, a little bit shy on the pace necessary. There's a great shot with that second pack too wide in the background. So just 2 cars right now working the outside up front. Chris Shearburn and the 9 of Eric Smith. They were just nose to nose with both the 32 of Leahy and the 25 of Ottinger. But like it has been all night long, the outside struggles in strength of numbers, and those 2 cars I think can only do so much right now.
If they want to go and have an opportunity to win this race, Evan, you're going to see some drivers hop up to the outside. Chris Shearburn and Eric Smith cannot do it alone. We've seen guys like Ryan Luza hop to the outside. Luza in the middle right now, underneath Shearburn and above Christian Chalner. So it needs strength in numbers, you're right. If somebody wants to win this race, they're going to have to hop to the outside. As I say that, here comes Chris Overland to try to make it at least a third to the outside and help Shearburn and help Eric Smith try to get it to the front.
He's been a constant on the outside all night long, but how about Blake Reynolds in the 3 car? Have not seen him up and in this main battle for the race lead all night. May very well have been one of the drivers that was taking it easy, buying his time. Of course, we saw a teammate to him in the 33 of Michael Guest up in this conversation a little bit earlier on in this race. Right now, though, the 33 machine back in that second pack in 17th, so he'll be the flag bearer for Team Dillon Esports.
And here comes that second pack, as you mentioned them, Evan. They have gotten grouped up, and they are playing nicey with one another. They know that they lost the ability to win this race if they don't work together. They have reeled in 2 seconds over the last 4 or 5 laps. That second group is catching the lead pack. Now, unfortunately, it's going to be a big wall of cars that they're going to find with this lead group being 3 wided out, but what this is going to do is put a ton of pressure on this group of drivers that are at least working together in some respects, because they all basically came down pit road together and did the same strategy. But here comes that second pack. They got the slipstream of the group in front, and there is no keeping that second group in the back for much longer.
And that 21 machine is Garrett Lowe this season. He made the switch from Renegades to join Wood Brothers Racing. That's not Ray Alfala this year. The 21 car of Garrett Lowe is going to be the first of this second pack, pushed by Jarl Tien to catch the lead group, but all they are being greeted by is a 3-wide wall. They have no way to translate that momentum into an advantage. So Tien picks the bottom, the 21 of Lowe picks the middle, and now it is just one big monstrous pack that is going to involve the top 34 cars last time by within a second and a half.
What was 16 is now 34, Evan, as they continue to work that outside line. Does Chris Shearburn, Eric Smith, and Chris Overland, but they might get a little bit of help now with more cars up there. You might get somebody trying to hop to the outside like a Ryan Luza, but right now stuck in the middle as he runs down the back straightaway into 3.
He's third car in line in the middle. There's the onboard shot with him. You can see that he looks very locked in. He's got the 97 to Gorlinski behind him. So you got Clampett and Luza as he pushed up a little bit, and there was a small bobble. Those 2 drivers are separating the William Byron Esports cars from being able to get together in the pack right now. But the outside has got some reinforcements. Not only is Overland and the 3 car up there, but look at everybody else. Jimmy Mullis into the conversation. You got Bolin, you've got Kerwin, you've got Novak. A handful of these cars, Randy, were the race leaders playing defense earlier. Now they find themselves on the back foot. And when you're the 7th car in line, 3 wide, you can only do so much.
Yeah, you really can't do much. It's actually the 18 of Bull, and he's going to drop out of that lead, out of that third line and drop it in the middle. That's the 5th or 6th time we've seen him do that. But one thing to also talk about, Evan, is we're 20 laps into this. We still have all 40 cars running, all cars with no significant damage. We've had no one come down behind the wall. No one has really required the pit crew to come out and do repairs to their cars. Dylan Duvall currently the only one a lap down because he had some problems like making the grid, and he's basically been out there running by himself for the entire race. But nearly 83 laps done here at the Daytona International Speedway, and everyone who took the green has completely untweaked body panels. It's not often that happens.
This could get dicey, though, because there is lap traffic dead ahead of your race leaders, Kane Cook and Brian Schoenberg, working together. They're the last 2 cars on the lead lap, but in just a duo, they're running about 3/4 of a second per lap slower than this lead pack. We've seen 2 wide be able to squeak by with some lapped cars, but unless that third lane totally evaporates, Tim, those lap cars either have to get off the racetrack or we're going to have to try to squeeze them 4 wide.
Yeah, they're going to have to try to blend in somewhere, and it might get a little bit tight as we work down the back straightaway. They continue to run 3 wide. Chris Shearburn gets that run down the straightaway. He's got a little disconnect between himself and Eric Smith, so he's going to lose that run into turn number 3. Ottinger and Keegan Leahy will take that inside line, but that little disconnect in between those top 2 cars was a little bit of the difference, and now they fall back to about 3rd side by side. Shearburn gets that little bit of a run through the tri-oval and will try to pull up even with Ottinger.
There's the onboard shot with your leader working on the inside line in Keegan Leahy, one of 4 international drivers represented in this year's driving class. Both he and Dylan Duvall from Canada. You've got Christian Chalner over the pond from the UK, Jarl Tien from Norway. Those 4 drivers adding to 36 American drivers in this series. And we talked about getting way out of the way. Kane Cook right to the apron. He wants nothing to do with that, so he drops down onto the apron, leaving Schoenberg on his own.
Yeah, that's hats off to Kane Cook right there. That's just a great call by him. And Brian Schoenberg, it looks like he's going to make it tough on these guys. He's trying to get up to that third lane. I don't like this from Brian. You see a hot third pack. The car that was pushing you just dropped away. Don't force these guys 4 wide. He's going to make them do it, though, and this is going to get tight. You can fit 4 and take them, but it's hard to do it at Daytona, and Schoenberg is getting bounced around on that outside line.
So much contact. Overland leaning on him. He was right up against the fence, and I think the saving grace is that when that 3 car came by, a very smart move by the 46 machine of Mullis to back off and give Reynolds an escape route. He tucked into the middle, making it only 3 wide, and somehow we survive for the time being. Again, if you're just tuning in, it's lap 86, now 87 of 100. Everybody good on fuel to the end. And so far, what has been a caution-free season opener to this eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series. If necessary, Tim, 3 attempts at overtime and green-white checkered finishes, but there's no guarantee that we're going to need that. As long as we get to the white flag, we're going to be fine. Let's take a second look, though, at that tight squeeze with the lap traffic.
Yeah, Brian Schoenberg made it a little bit tight for those leaders on the inside. He's on the outside line. He's as high as he can get right now, Evan. But those guys are fighting for a win, fighting for the lead. Brian Schoenberg trying to fight to stay on the lead lap. Chris Overland gives him a little body check as he goes by. At the end of the day, no harm, no foul, but it was close. A couple of these drivers really holding their breath getting by the Clint Boyer Racing 79.
I think it was tough. It looked like on that short shoot, Randy, they were going to be okay, but the problem was all the cars on that third lane had not gotten by when they actually had to make the turn into turn 1, and that's when it got really sketchy, and there was contact. At about 195 miles an hour, we get away with it this time. Looks like ahead of the race leaders now, though. Tons of clean racetrack, so not a concern at the moment until they catch up to another group of cars, but they're about a half a lap ahead or behind, however you look at it. So your race leaders should have the racetrack to themselves as this time by 12 laps to go.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely tight. I would have liked to see Brian just cut down underneath the yellow line and let the field go by. You can go under the yellow to let people pass you. It's just making passes that you can't do down there. We saw Kane Cook do that, but man, that was interesting. And now the question is going to be is who is friends with who as we're approaching 25 laps to go in this race. The 25 of Ottinger. He leads that second line in the middle right now, and that third groove that was really heating up about 10 laps ago, Evan, isn't so strong anymore. They're trying to get it going. The 14 of Brandon Kittel is currently the one waving the flag on that upper line, trying to get people going to that upper line with him. Ryan Luza currently sits second. Has Luza been out of the third groove all day?
I don't think so, except for maybe pit stops. That's the only time where he wanted to get away from the fence. He is up on the outside, and he's been a pusher all night long. But that is that 14 machine of Brandon Kittel, the Clint Boyer Racing entry, spearheading the charge for the third lane. You're on board with Ray Alfala. He is the fourth car in line in the middle. Last time by the start-finish line, it was good enough for position number 8. Right now, live timing showing he's in 9th position. And you can see that third line to his right-hand side get the run down the straightaway, but it's going to die off in the corner. 4 cars up top is better than I think the 2 that they've been working with all night. I still think they need a few more if they want it to happen.
And the driver that Ray Alfala is pushing right now, how about Clash winner John Gorlinski? The 97 car is getting a little closer towards the front of this field. Keep an eye on that William Byron Esports number 97. And he's got a teammate 2 cars up. We got a Burton Kligerman Esports car and Logan Clampett in the middle of those 2 teammates. But drivers now positioning themselves. They know where they need to be. Evan, it's 10 laps to go in the season opener. I see Brad Davies kind of lurking on the inside there. 5th on the inside. Haven't talked a whole lot about Davies tonight, but he's also in the mix should something happen and a shakeup happen here with these couple of front rows.
And I don't think it's a surprising stat that we talk about Keegan Leahy leading, that we talk about the unpredictability and the wide openness about Daytona, that Keegan Leahy is not one of the 10 different race winners that we have seen here in the past. Nick Ottinger, who leads the middle line, is 2018 winner here at Daytona, looking to match Alfala maybe as a possible only other multi-time race winner here at the World Center of Racing. The next time by, they'll see 8 laps to go, and that is still an eternity, especially if you're either of those lead cars.
And you mentioned that multi-time race winner, Ray Alfala. He currently sits 4th in line in the middle groove. He was 9th when they came across the start-finish line that last trip around the racetrack. But, of course, that can cycle a couple positions up and down every trip through, depending on what the lines to his left and right are doing. The 25 of Ottinger, great run this time. Might just lead this lap, but actually, no, the 99 of Clampett not able to give him enough of a push. But Ottinger, he drove that exit off of turn 4 really well, was able to nose ahead of Keegan Leahy, and that outside line still struggling. I'm surprised here, Evan, inside of 10 laps to go, we've not seen a couple of these guys from that middle groove, or even a couple people at the back of the bottom line jump up to that second or third line and try to get a push going there.
And really no sets of teammates working together at the moment either. We've seen that at a couple of points this evening where you got a couple of sets of 2 drivers working together, but in the end of this one, it may just be every man for himself. I mean, I guess even if he had a teammate with Tim at the last lap, at some point that allegiance has got to go out of the window, but maybe not as early as, maybe you're forced into a position 2 down, 93 laps behind. Leahy leading the bottom, still Ottinger leading the middle, and up top it is the 14 of Brandon Kittel. There's a lot of really anxious race cars, 3-4 rows back in these lines. They just can't go anywhere. Does anybody dare to force a 4th lane?
Somebody's going to have to try to make a move, Evan, if you want to win this race and you want to add your name to the winners at Daytona in this eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. You really have to step up. Somebody's going to make that evasive move. Somebody might make it into a 4th groove. The question is, who does it and where does it happen in the middle of the pack? If you're a guy like Logan Clampett, you want to win Daytona, but how do you make that move even from the second lane, sitting in second?
I don't know what's going to happen as we take now 6 laps to go. But Randy, this race has been absolutely incredible so far. 3 wide from the second half of the opening lap of this race to now. Throughout 2 green flag cycles of pit stops to this point. A lead pack that is 34 cars deep. I don't know how many of these race cars are going to look clean at the end of it, but so far to this point, a stellar showing for a season opener.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is the most competitive I've ever seen this season opener. We haven't seen, typically what happens is you'll get 10 or so cars that end up making a mistake when they come down pit road. A lot of times it'll be a lot of the new names as they're coming to 5 laps to go here. People still getting aggressive, getting IE, trying to set up some sort of a move. But typically a lot of the new drivers in the championship, you might see them make mistakes early on pit road or even late on pit road, and that strings it out. I don't think I've ever seen the entire field be this packed together coming to the end of this race. And you mentioned teammates and whether or not there's going to be much allegiance there, Evan, come to the checkered flag. There's only one name that comes to mind that's ever done that, even in NASCAR history, and that's Bobby Labonte pushing Trevor Bayne to his 2011 win. Didn't even think about jumping out ahead of Trevor, just pushed him straight into victory lane pretty much. And, you know, I think someone's going to have to do that here and push someone in front of them to the win, just because an opportunity's not going to open up for them.
And listen, if you can't make the move for the race win on your own, if you could be the driver who gives the assist to the eventual race winner, that all but guarantees you about a top 3 or a top 5 finish, depending on just how tightly congested we are up at the front of the field. But it is crunch time now at Daytona. Any incident at this point on would push us into overtime, as Keegan Leahy has led on the inside now for oh so long after that second cycle of pit stops. I mean, what can he do in this situation as well? I know that he's kind of in the catbird seat, Tim, but he's really relying on the push from Zelensky. At least if you're on the outside, you can try to get creative. All he can do is hold the double yellow and hold the right foot down.
And that's the only thing he can do right now. If you're Nick Ottinger, you're going to try to suck down a little bit, get a little bit of that side drive. If you're Keegan Leahy, you can't really do much of anything right now. Hold that yellow line and hope Nick Ottinger doesn't get run, and hope that outside line doesn't pick up a couple of friends and zoom by you on the outside. Ottinger doesn't get that run and try to get to that inside of you. But Keegan Leahy right now in the driver's seat up in front, as long as nothing happens on the outside and they get a run. But down the back straightaway, 2.5 laps left to go in this one. Hang on.
So far, so good. You're starting to see, though, in the center of the quarter, that side drafted and the pinching getting a little bit more extreme. That outside line no longer really running all the way up against the wall. There's about 3/4 of a lane to their right-hand side when they're in the center of the quarter. 2 laps to go now, that time from Daytona. The third lane starting to dwindle a little bit. The advantage for the bottom and the middle right now sitting at a 3-car length advantage. Can that fortunate Cattell pull something out of this up top?
If you want to make that outer line work, you have to go there right now. I don't think you have enough time to jump up on this next lap and get the momentum built up and be able to make that stick. They're trying to get a push here to get their way forward. A 6-car jumps up in line at the tail end of the field. I think that might be Michael Connie at the back part of the top lane trying to make that stick. Actually, no, I think it was, but off of turn 4, they're going to be seeing the white, and that third line is still trying to get going. It's Ottinger and Leahy at the stripe, but how are things going to get heat up as they work into 1 and 2?
White flag presented by iRacing. This race is official. Leahy on the bottom, the 25 of Ottinger on what right now we're going to call the outside line, representing 2 new teams to the series in Denny Hamlin Racing and William Byron Esports. The third lane is still too far back. Logan Clampett may have an option to hit the eject button. He is second on line on the outside. Here we come for the final time at a turn 4. Leahy holds the bottom. Ottinger's gonna get a shove. They're gonna wreck behind in a photo finish, and it's good enough on the inside. Keegan Leahy, by 4 1/1000ths of a second, wins the season opener at Daytona.
Evan, he did what he had to do, as there are cars scattered along the tri-oval. We got a couple that are upside down, but the 32 of Keegan Leahy held that inside line, held the double yellow line, did what he had to do, let everybody else do what they needed to do around them to try to take away the win, and it was thwarted. The 32 of Keegan Leahy becomes an 11th different winner at Daytona.
I suppose that we knew there was going to be a crash coming at some point, and, well, there were two of them coming to the checkered flag, so a lot of the cars who were top 10, top 15 may not get those actual results, but you see the shot with him. I think that was a big sigh of relief. I just saw, Randy, we had checked in with Keegan a couple of times tonight, and he was stone cold. He didn't look nervous at all, but I'll tell you what, when we took that shot with about 2 laps to go, I saw a lot more blinking and a lot more heavy breaths. He was feeling it, but at the end of the day, it works out, and as he celebrates on the front straightaway, this winning moment is brought to you by Coca-Cola, the official fan refreshment of eNASCAR, as Leahy wins the season opener.
What a run here for Denny Hamlin Racing to come in as an entirely new organization, support two of the biggest drivers in this championship, and have Keegan Leahy, who was such a hot driver last year, really was a dominant driver, I think a lot would argue, last year, and have Keegan coming out and win this season opener. He was out front all day. Keegan drove a perfect race, and him and the 83 of Bobby Zielinski, they managed that bottom line perfectly for the last stint of this race.
Let's take a look top to bottom at tonight's full race results from Daytona. In fact, we'll take a look at the replay before we get to that, Tim, and we'll relive all of the action on the final lap here. You're going to see the wreck coming from behind, but Ottinger had a whale of a push from Logan Clampett. You can see 4 or 5 wide crashing. In fact, most of the wreck, it actually happens beyond the start-finish line, so I think most drivers are going to be okay with where they finished, but it is up front, those first 5 cars that were able to stay together.
Yeah, Bobby Bryant went to the inside, almost anticipating something was going to happen here by the looks of it, and actually that's the 47 car going to the inside line, but you mentioned it, Evan, they're 4 or 5 wide, they're kind of sliding across the line, and after that, all heck breaks loose. Graham Boland goes for a wild ride in the 18 car, up and over, and everybody else sliding afterwards, but for the most part, I don't want to call them pinballs, but that's pretty much what they were coming across the line. Look at all those cars going across, but they made it 100 laps.
Yeah, that's all of them, but they did make it the distance of 250 miles. Now we'll take a look at your eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series results from Daytona, and it is Leahy. There's the margin of victory, 5/1000ths of a second over Ottinger for the race win. So Leahy, $1,500, Ottinger, $1,000, and it is the pusher on the inside. Zielinski steals $500 away from Logan Clampett by just 3/1000ths of a second for that final step on the podium.
Yeah, those guys were fighting really hard there at the head of the field. I mean, really all those names, Evan, Keegan Leahy, Bobby Zielinski, Logan Clampett, some of the biggest names from last year, and we now get down to the drivers outside of the top 10. Graham Boland, the 18 in the car, who took quite a tumble. You saw there on the replay. He comes home just outside of the top 10. A couple movers in this list as well. Colin Keister going from 37th up to 14th. Shearburn moving the wrong way, 4th back to 15th.
And this is now where you're in the middle of all of the chaos. But again, the good news is they were wrecked beyond the start-finish line. Blake Reynolds going to be the first car in the second half. Casey Kerwin. I mean, these are all drivers that looked good at points. Chris Overland was a driver who spearheaded a third lane for the most of the night. And then there's some of the quieter drivers. Alex McCollum for G2. He comes home in P26. Justin Bolton, P30. I know those aren't great results, but I guess if you're 30th, Tim, you could always have finished 10 spots worse, so you get what you can take.
And you look at the back half of this field, Bob Bryan, Steve Sheehan, Malik Gray, missed it on that final round of pit stops. Brian Schoenberg, Dylan Duval, Kane Cook, all finished 1 lap down. 34 drivers were in that lead pack, and most of them came sliding across the line at the end of it.
Let's go now and chat with tonight's race winner in the Daytona 250, representing Denny Hamlin Racing. It is the driver of the number 32 machine of Keegan Leahy, who gets the first checkered flag of 2020. Keegan, congratulations.
Thanks so much, Evan. That was incredible. I can't believe we pulled this off. We had a game plan from the start. We short pitted, got ahead of the pack, just trying to play it safe. We just wanted to be there at the end, and somehow we pulled it off.
Admittedly, we were looking in with your onboard a couple of times late in this race, and you looked pretty calm, but leading that inside line for what I'm sure felt like an eternity in the run to the end, what was the strategy, and obviously how do you think you played it out as this race went green all the way?
I'm not sure how calm I was. I'm sure if you had that same heart monitor on that Jimmy Johnson had during the clash, I'd be well over what he was showing. Yeah, I'm still feeling my heart pound. And yeah, we just decided to run the bottom. We needed to pit earlier than everyone else. That was our plan from the get-go. So we wanted to just run on the bottom and all pit together. If you're stuck in the outside lane, you're going to have to wait another lap or two before you can pit. So that was the goal there. Yeah, and that finish was just absolutely crazy. I had Bobby. I worked with him. We were discussing through the whole race, and he pushed me to this win, and I got to credit it to him.
The race winner tonight from Daytona, Keegan Leahy, who gets career win number 6. In fact, that ties him for 6th all-time in series wins, alongside some veteran names in Brad Davies and Zach Novak. We'll pass things on down the line. Tim Terry on the mic now with Nick Ottinger, who comes home in second.
The William Byron Esports driver comes home in position number 2. Nick, we've been here before, finishing in position number 2 this time at Daytona. What else did you need in that number 25 car to get you to that win?
We needed a little bit better time push. I mean, Logan did all he could, but I'm gonna tell you, it was a hard fought win there for Keegan, and I was just that close, dude. I didn't really expect him to go below the yellow line. I mean, I expected us to race it out, pretty mildly fair, door to door, but I mean, he done whatever was in the rules. Not happy to lose it by that much in that way, but man, our Logitech G machine was freaking fast, dude. I'm ecstatic. I'm happy for our William Byron Esports team. I mean, we had a great showing. We cycled to where we needed to be, and Logan did all he could to help us out there.
And your teammate finished in position number 6 as well. So that's a great start for William Byron Esports. Momentum-wise, it's a 20-race season. This is only race number 1, but how big is this a shot in the arm going forward, trying to win this big eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series championship?
It's huge. Anytime you can start the season just finishing Daytona is huge. You always want to have a top 10 going into Daytona, because that just honestly gives a good foundation for your season. And I mean, I would say the last few years, I mean, we've had solid luck. We put ourselves in good positions. I mean, ever since 2018, I don't think we finished worse than 4th at a plate track. We really want to keep that going. I mean, I think our Logitech G, some seats, Chevy Camaros, I mean, we're going to be stout this year. I mean, I want us to keep performing. John's doing really good. I love having John as a teammate. I mean, the sky's the limit for this team, and I hope we can keep succeeding here.
That's our second place finisher, Nick Ottinger. Nick, congratulations tonight.
And talking next, we're going to go to the third place finisher here today, Bobby Zielinski in the number 83, one of the fastest race cars out there on the racetrack, and probably the shiniest race car out there as well. Bobby, you took pole, and you're out there out front all day. Tell me about your 100 laps. You look like you just got out front and had a car that could not get past for the most part.
Yeah, screaming off. Yeah, it was great. That was the plan going in, is a few of us could work together. We saw us pitting together. Was able to lead early, and then Sherbring got back by us. That was just great. You love when you have a car like that at a restrictor plate race, and you can somewhat control your destiny. It was fun. It was just a lot of fun. At the end there, I tried to push Keegan past those two so I could get up in their lane and beat him. But I was in the position where, we were working together all race. And we just helped him get the win, helped ourselves get in third. It was a great way to start out the season. I've never finished this well at a plate track. And I had a lot of fun.
And you mentioned the fact, and even when we talked to Keegan, he mentioned the fact that you guys came down pit road early. The first round of pit stops saw one of the most interesting strategies I've ever seen with a group of cars that pit early. You guys were doing this weird leapfrog to maintain pace, and it was working. Who cooked that up?
I'm going to say me, because Keegan would give me the credit. But we were kind of experimenting with ways where we could pit out of sequence, and not lose that much time or even gain time, so we can just control our own destiny. You don't want to pit with 20 cars if you don't have to. Credit to Challoner and Ashton Crowder for working with me, Keegan, and Shearburn. Couldn't have done it without them. And yeah, that's really where it came from, and it kind of worked. It would have really worked if they didn't have the back of our draft after pit cycles, but I think that was a little too much to ask for. Gosh, this is the most fun I've had at Daytona. I love being able to control my fate pretty much. It's great.
Well, you mentioned that Keegan would have given you credit, and that's exactly what he did for pushing him to the win. So congratulations to the pair of you guys for the big win here today. And Evan, man, oh man, we talked about all the new teams, and new teams come into this series, finish 1, 2, 3 in the season opener.
And no better way for those drivers to kick off their campaign, but also for those teams to kick off their foray into this eNASCAR iRacing series. Let's take a look now at tonight's Coca-Cola Taste That Moment of the race. It is going to be the run to the checkered flag following the 32 of Keegan Leahy. Held true to the bottom, Tim. We mentioned it with about 5 or 10 to go, that all he could do was hold the double yellow and hope he got the help. And Bobby Zielinski provided exactly the support he needed.
Bobby Zielinski on the back bumper giving that push, and the 32 of Keegan Leahy holding that inside and going to that apron, and you can see that back there with a few of those drivers going to the apron, maybe not by choice, but the 32 of Keegan Leahy completely legal by what we're told, so that will put Keegan into victory lane. Nick Ottinger a little bit disappointed, but Evan, I'd be disappointed too if I finished second in one of the biggest races of the season, but Keegan Leahy picking up where he left off last year, came a little bit short of the big prize at Homestead, now gets it at Daytona. Same state, different season. We'll see what momentum will carry him throughout 2020.
Biggest thing I picked up for the overhead shot, if that start-finish line was where it is at Talladega, Nick Ottinger is probably your winner. He had all that momentum coming to the start-finish line. So for the drivers who get the good points out of this one, and even for those who aren't quite as happy, they get through Daytona. Round 1 is now in the rear-view mirror, which means that next up on deck, we head out to Fontana, California, Randy, to the Virtual Auto Club Speedway. We'll be there to its sister track in Michigan later this year, but those 2-mile D-shaped ovals, always so much fun. An unforgettable finish last year with Eric J. Smith, and we look for more excitement again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you mentioned that finish with Eric J. Smith, and that may have been the race of the season, really. The way that the finish of that race played out with, I think we had 3 or 4 different leaders over the course of that final lap, and Eric J. Smith is a rookie picking up his first win in the second race of 2019, and I think we're going to see some more great racing. We know these cars really like to suck up in the draft at the big 2-mile racetracks. We saw that at both Auto Club and Michigan last year, and man, I think it's going to be a ton of fun in 2 weeks' time.
We're officially off and away on the road to over $300,000 as the season opener is now behind us. On behalf of the entire team behind the scenes, for Tim Terry, Randy Chennett, and myself, Evan Pasoko, I want to thank you for tuning in and to congratulate Keegan Leahy, winner at Daytona. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time, Tuesday, February the 25th at 9 o'clock Eastern Time from the Virtual Auto Club Speedway for the next race of the 2020 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series.